This is the kind of news as a cryptocurrency investor that where the future is headed. Listen, I'm Crypto Wealth. This is my YouTube channel. I appreciate you watching. My whole goal, I'm part crypto investor, part advocate for Bitcoin technology and Bitcoin adoption for many reasons, but one is right here. There's a tremendous investment opportunity here to be recognized. And again, this isn't investment advice. This is one man's opinion. I'm not an investment expert at all, although I'm learning more and more about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency every single day. And I suggest that you do the same. So crippling economic problems accelerate Bitcoin's adoption in Argentina. So at the end of this article, when I get done talking about this, at the end of this video, I should say, I'm going to discuss with you where I think long term this leads. I think this is just a crack in a foundation, and I ultimately believe that mass adoption will occur, and I can totally explain why here in a moment. But first of all, let's take a look at this article. Every time a big fat whale on Wall Street says that Bitcoin might be a bubble, it makes me want to write about why I hold my Bitcoin. I could lecture on monetary theory, describe the characteristics of currency, compare them to Bitcoin, or I could about of the supply shortage curve of Bitcoin, or about another of the myriad reasons why Bitcoin is likely to be successful in the long term. Today, though, I'd like to talk about adoption. One look at South America will help you understand why Bitcoin has become such a phenomenon. So basically it goes on to explain that the government misuse populist governments don't know math. After some time the money runs out and it becomes necessary to use creativity in their accounting. It's not by chance that there are at least two recent economic facts that impacted the Argentines and made them realize the value of a deflationary currency. Okay, so I want you to understand what they mean when they say populist governments. Populist governments are what comes out of any form of democratic government ultimately becomes a populist government. In other words, populist means led by the people or led by the masses. You see, most people, when you have a government, whether it's in our case in the US Congress or the president or whatever, when you have a government that is saying, you know, hey, the middle class needs help, we want to give them a tax break. Obviously, the middle class is going to vote. So what happens as politicians, it is just a natural evolution. The more they promise to give or the more they promise to help, the more votes they end up getting. It's literally almost a form of bribery. Now, I'm oversimplifying this, but this is simply the evolution of government. What eventually happens is governments get themselves in financial trouble because they promise to give more than they can ultimately afford, and that creates a lot of financial issues long term. So that's what it said, right? That's what he's saying in this article. Populist governments don't know math. After some time, the money runs out and it becomes necessary to use creativity in their accounting. The U.S. government has been doing this for decades, and because of the way the U.S. government is set up, they'll be able to continue to do it probably for several more decades at least. So then he goes on to talk about basically how, you know, the government has an exchange rate set up and people start exchanging money in local stores on kind of a black market at a discount, so to speak, because the government is charging too much to exchange money. So what happens is the money's getting inflated and hyperinflation or quick inflation starts to take place. So people are losing value in the money and in their savings. So he talks about just 2 years after the emergence of Bitcoin, the Argentines felt betrayed by their own national currency. In other words, they felt like their currency wasn't good enough. They lost trust in it. They lost faith in it because it was being manipulated by the government at the exchange rates, because the government was trying to basically make money off of exchanging their own currency. Those who suffer from the effects of such monetary policy are likely to look favorable upon a new deflationary currency such as Bitcoin. I want to explain what this term deflationary means. That basically means that it cannot be devalued by the government just printing more of it. Bitcoin is solid, it's stable, there's a limited supply of it, it cannot be counterfeited, it is solid and it's reliable, and that's why people trust it. This last paragraph is incredible. Wall Street bankers with their million-dollar bonuses might not understand Bitcoin or see any point to it, as they make lofty proclamations from their Manhattan penthouses. But for ordinary people suffering under crippling economic conditions, Bitcoin could literally keep them alive as their national currency drops like a stone. So, for example, there's a sizable percentage of people out there who believe in who believe in like gold and silver, precious metals, because they believe that it's a good store of wealth. The problem with gold and silver and precious metals is it's not very transportable. That's one big problem for it. And it is possible to potentially counterfeit gold and silver as well. So this is why this is what I believe is a crack in the vase of mass adoption. The more smaller economies, Brazil has seen a rise in Bitcoin adoption. Argentina has. The more of these smaller economies that contend to crack, that begin to crack at their foundation, the more likely people are to their populations are to adopt Bitcoin. At some point, this is a chain reaction. More small governments fail, or their finances fail. More small government finances fail, the more small countries' economics fail. This continues on. At some point, middle-sized and larger countries start recognizing, some of these companies, some of these governments, by default, because their people are doing it, starting to fall on Bitcoin as a fallback. Sooner or later, the tipping point comes in where you're like, what if this thing actually continues to catch on? What if we're late to the game? No government wants to miss out on this, because if they miss out on this, they're going to potentially put their entire country at risk financially with the rest of the world, because he who controls the money controls the power. And every country, the largest superpowers in the world, ultimately want to have more power, more control. There's no exception to this, whether it's China, Russia, the US, or anyone else. So all of a sudden, they start slowly at first and then quickly later buying up Bitcoin. I have several scenarios where I can see Bitcoin mass adoption. That is definitely one of them. And when I see articles like this tells me that that's just confirmation. Bitcoin is on the way to ultimately getting adopted by the masses. At first, they blow it off. At first, they'll ridicule it and criticize it. But eventually, they'll even try to stop it. But eventually, they're going to want to own it, because they're going to want to maintain their financial standing on the world stage. Stay tuned to my videos. Stay tuned to my channel. Make certain that you start learning about the crypto space, the Bitcoin space, the cryptocurrency space, the blockchain technology, because without question, it is the wave of the future. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it.